Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our continuing work with glamour. Of course, this is one of those days which a lot of Americans remember, and the world too. It's September 11th, and it began a new era and attitude in the world. At least it brought it to the surface. We had a situation where even today, after many, many conspiracy theories, we don't know entirely what really happened. There are different uh, ideas concerning how it took place and who was responsible and all of that. It has not been thoroughly solved. I guess we've moved on to other conspiracy theories. But behind it all, someone's lying, and someone is misapprehending, and the truth is not coming through. The truth is being masked, I believe, and that's why we'll be taking up on this day, especially given the political situation as it is, the whole glamour of misrepresentation, the whole glamour of lying, or feeling that one must do that. Um, So I just, there are a few of us here. I just want to say, Tuya and I have been out most of the night here because our cats escaped. And, when you have house cats and they escape into the forest, you may be presented with a problem. And, well, I think all's well that ends well. I think they're back, but they haven't been spoken to yet. And I, for one, at least intend to speak to them about their little fugue away from human influence. Anyway, they feel they are within their rights, and perhaps they are. All right, I'd like to say hi then to those of you who managed to be here, to Catherine and Jessica and Karen and Leslie and Martha and Martine, Miro, and Rebecca, and Risto, and Suzanne, Vera, and Zenaidi. And I just also want to say that later tonight we'll have our webinar on a treatise on cosmic fire in depth, and basically because of the mishap that occurred with the computer, the runaway computer, goodness, runaway cats and runaway computer, I did some extra programs to fill in for what I felt needed closer attention. So those three solo programs plus our question and answer program, the question and answer aspect from last week will be up on Makara before long. If you want to go into it in greater depth, then indeed I did. I said, well, now I'm not going to be rushed. And so I went into it in a way that I think is more thorough and more clear. But I liked our question and answer work together, and I retained at least that part. So that's available to you if you want to add that to your potential studies. We are on page 163 here in the Glamour book, I think. And this is part of what's called the ending of glamour. We've been through discussion of the dweller on the threshold, and we're not finished yet. There'll be more of that coming along. It's such a useful book, and I think we can see how deeply at this time semi-unthinking humanity is immersed in glamour. Yeah, so if you've just arrived, just Yeah, I can't really get into the book too much, into the list too much, but welcome to you. And Michael and Joe, you can field any questions that are coming up temporarily, just in a written form. So Master DK goes on, and we'll see how far we take it. All generalizations admit of error. Okay, even analogies, and instead of rigorous adherence to the law of correspondences, and even then errors creep in, but at least you have a general idea of equivalent, semi-equivalent situations. It might, however, be said that, we're back here in the time of the World War, which many have called the Armageddon. I remember hearing that in the Agni Yoga Society. Then I remember reading something from the Tibetan which seemed to indicate that he too considered it a kind of Armageddon. Many people are looking forward to that particular battle, but maybe it has been fought. Anyway, he said, it might be said, he said, that Germany has focused in herself world glamour, the most potent and expressive of the three aspects of glamour. Notice that glamour is a generality, but at the same time, it has a specific application to the emotional quality and to the astral body. So glamour as a generality for illusion, glamour, and Maya, and glamour being also specific. Japan is manifesting the force of Maya, the crudest form of material force, and Italy, individualistic. It has that Leo, I think Leo soul, doesn't it? Italy, individualistic and mentally polarized, is the expression of world illusion. Okay, so let's just kind of keep that in mind as the Tibetan sees it. The United Nations, those are, he refers to that not as the organization with which we are familiar, but as the group of nations that were fighting on behalf of the forces of light. It's going to be so interesting to see what he says about the past 75, 80, 90 years of politics and human interaction when he was not writing. We can expect some very keen observations and probably some shocks, I would say. The United Nations, with all their faults, limitations, weaknesses, and nationalisms, he doesn't overlook those, are focusing the conflict between the dweller and the angel, and thus the three forms of glamour, and the final form of the conflict between the spiritual ideal and its material opponent are appearing simultaneously. So, we have to be willing to stand up and not let these forces run rampant over us. That would accomplish nothing and would lead really to the downfall of humanity, which we came perilously close to undergoing in the winter of 1942. That's one of the most shocking ideas to emerge from the teaching, how humanity almost went down at that point. But when the sun turned northward, we're familiar with the idea in the winter solstice in the north in 1942, essentially the crisis had been interiorly passed, and the war was interiorly won, even though it took more years to work out the disastrous results and come into the achievement. So anyway, the United Nations is focusing the final form of the conflict between the spiritual ideal and its material opponent, and they're appearing simultaneously, glamour and the spiritual ideal. And remember, it's an extension of what happened long ago, maybe 4 million years ago, on that perhaps that plain south of the city of Delhi, where the great battle of Kurukshetra was fought out. The United Nations are, however, gradually and most decisively throwing the weight of their effort and aspiration on the side of the angel. Looks like this is taking place, well, you know, this is taking place in the 1930s, I think. This is being written, maybe later once the war has already begun, I'm not sure. But anyway, the other than the Axis powers, they are throwing their effort and aspiration, as we must individually, on the side of the angel. So we must do the same individually, thus restoring the lost balance and slowly producing on a planetary scale those attributes and conditions which will eventually dispel illusion, dissipate glamour, and devitalize the prevalent Maya. So that is the way the victory occurred, because of the decision of the majority of nations. And of course, we have decisions today. Maybe they are in less temporarily less violent form, but I think they're every bit as critical. We do face the dissolution and destruction of the Piscean civilization, and of course it must and will come. And the question is, will it come in such a way that humanity will be truly laid low and have to recover from a great cataclysm? Or will it come in a more reasonable transitional form with many disturbances, but with the Aquarian values and ideals emerging? So the United Nations, I guess this is what this is all about and what they're doing. And of course, we have to consider there are perhaps some countries today who would not be called, you know, true members of the United Nations, and the values they seek to espouse are still pretty egotistical, nationalistic. But at least there are no strictly Black Lodge nations that are operating, although you do have elements within them that are aligned with that lodge of materialism. So anyway, they are seeking then, and so are we, to dispel illusion. Notice the words, how he chooses them: to dispel, to dissipate, and to devitalize. They become ever more material as we descend. Dispelling being the least material action. Dispel illusion, dissipate as you would a cloud, glamour, and devitalize, rob of energy, the prevalent Maya. This they are doing by the increased clear thinking of the general public of all the nations, bound together to conquer the three Axis powers, or what we would call the vestiges now, because we've been told that the door of evil has not yet been adequately sealed. And obviously, through that door, many things which oppose the peace, the sharing, and the house cleaning that the Christ needs to reappear, many things that oppose those desirable objectives are coming through that door left ajar. Anyway, clear thinking, though, is emerging, and they need that to conquer the three-axis powers, and we need that to conquer the vestiges of those tendencies, and by their growing ability to conceive ideas in terms of the whole, in terms of a desirable world order or federation, not the dominance, the hegemony of any one nation, and their capacity to discriminate between the forces of light and the potency of evil and materialism. Now, it can be questioned whether we have developed that, because I think there are so many people who are so strictly personal in their ways of thinking of themselves and of their nation, and personal in their behavior, that is nationalistic, that they do not think in terms of the whole. As a matter of fact, notice the war going on against globalism that is taking place in some of the nations. They want their good old national prerogatives back, and they don't want to think in terms of the whole. Non-holistic thinking, of course, will lead to the general condition of glamour, and actually is the result of glamour. The work being done by those who see the world stage as the arena for the conflict between the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence might be itemized as the following here. Number one, producing of those world conditions in which the forces of light can overcome the forces of evil. This they can do by the weight of their armed forces, but that, of course, never lasts entirely, plus their clear insight. And upon this, even today, upon generating this clear insight, we must work. I mean, and this is our, role as educators, let us say. There is a great expression along the second ray line of education, and without this, people will remain in the darkness of the glamour, and the reality will be distorted, and the great lies will be told. Really, Germany could not have risen to power, and I suppose Italy and Japan too, without the will to lie of the leaders, and to distort reality before the non-discriminating masses of people. Okay, so there are those who do see the world stage as the arena of conflict for the dweller and for the angel, and conditions are produced where the overcoming can occur. Also, the educating of humanity in the distinction between spirituality and materialism, and it's not just churchianity and materialism, because there's many material infiltrations into the normal approach to religion. And I guess maybe one symbol of that has been the third-rate personality of the Catholic Church, and even in Protestantism it has come in, and certainly we are offered material heavens and material paradises to look on ahead, which do not challenge our abstract thought at all. So humanity needs to distinguish between spirituality and materialism, pointing to the different goals of the combatant forces. It's still going on, and this question of the separation of church and state. That has been considered an important founding objective, a Masonic objective, actually. And we see those forces that try to bring back the presence of dangerous theocracies, where, according to your religious beliefs, so the laws of the land are formulated. This would take us back to a medieval way of thinking, and it has to be definitely avoided. So, educating humanity in the distinction between spirituality and materialism, and it's still being fought out. The distinction between sharing and greed, outlining a future world wherein the four freedoms will be dominant, and all will have that which is needed for the right living process. Sometimes what looks like sharing is actually promoting one's own selfish welfare. And as DK said, many of those who apparently serve are getting more out of the service than the ones served in terms of their reputation and the way they are looked upon and the money and property that flows to them because of their so-called generosity. Speech and worship, freedom of and freedom from want and freedom from fear, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And then education in terms of light and dark. Demonstrating the difference between an illumined future of liberty and opportunity and a dark future of slavery. There's no question that the lodge of materialism, working through their extensions, amongst whom are the very greedy capitalists, are looking to enslave humanity. The economic slavery already exists. Maybe, I don't know, do we still have indentured servants? I think so. There are people who cannot be released until they fulfill a certain amount of labor for those to whom they owe a great deal of money. And that I was just thinking about that hard labor long ago. I'm kind of a classical musician, but there was this song by Tennessee Ernie Ford, and it was called 16 Tons, and it was kind of all about oppressive labor, probably of minorities, and there was a line in it, I owe my, St. Peter, don't you call me, because I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. And basically, it's a kind of economic slavery, and whole nations end up in that slave condition, having to serve larger, more powerful nations with the few commodities they have, and in such a way that there's no end in sight of what they owe monetarily. So a dark future of slavery is possible. And there has been, I don't know, this term, for instance, speaking from the American perspective, it's been going around, this idea of American carnage, which means, bloody slaughter. And that kind of thing was enunciated at the inaugural address of 2016, and it did paint a dark future. And one of the candidates, the Democratic candidate at this time, has talked about the dark period through which we have been passing, basically where soul values are obscured and personal values through selfish nationalism are advanced. Okay, and then education regarding, well, let's see, let me basically make note here. I mean, these are very practical things, and they're going on even right now. And we can't enter the Aquarian age properly unless we get rid of these tendencies and make these necessary discriminations. So the distinction between fellowship and separation, let's just say we're entering in the age of Aquarius, what can be called the age of brotherhood, during especially the second 2 decanates of Aquarius, maybe several hundred years ahead. Every decade lasts about 720 years. But the 2 brothers are found in Gemini, and then there's that whole question of the realization of equality in brotherhood, monadic equality coming in under Venus. So the last 2 decanates of Aquarius hold out a promise of true fellowship, true brotherhood. Or we can stick with Saturnian separation and non-cooperation and taking advantage of others. So the choice is between fellowship and separation, indicating a world order where racial hatreds, now so evident, caste distinctions found, let's just say between the moneyed classes and those that are devoid of that symbol. And also when you think about India and even the United Kingdom, some of the vestiges of that old system are there. And religious differences. There are so many sects, over 400, I think, just in the United States alone. And in the different countries, people are all split up in terms of their religious orientation because of the distinctions of the concrete mind. Well, all these things will form no barrier to international understanding. And the Axis order of master races determined religious attitudes and enslaved peoples. Just think that is what could result. So there's no pretty picture, and we're not over with it yet. There are dystopian views of how things could turn out. When you look at, there was this film, very interesting reincarnational film called Cloud Atlas. It had Tom Hanks and Halle Berry and I don't know, some other Hugh Grant playing an unaccustomed role and of an evil character, actually. And basically it looked forward to a kind of dystopian situation here on Earth of master races. I don't know about determined religious attitudes, but there are those who would definitely impose their narrow religious attitudes on others. And certainly there seem to be no qualms in the minds of some to enslave others. So what will it be? What will it be? And one more here, I think, the whole and the part, the discrimination between the whole and the part. Now, obviously, being students of esotericism, we know a little bit about that, pointing to the time which is approaching under the evolutionary urge of spirit, which tends to see in wholes, doesn't it? Wherein the part or the point of life assumes its responsibility for the whole, and the whole exists for the good of the part. This is the relationship between the one and the many, another aspect of that relationship. The many serve the one serves the many. This comes in a lot under Gemini, really, which is going to be an important era during the age of Aquarius. It's the second era, the era of Mercury. And let's see, if I were to turn to another page here. And I go to Esoteric Astrology, page 332. We have the attitude of I serve myself. I serve my brother. I serve the one. So we can see the beginning of brotherhood, and we can see a more advanced stage of brotherhood when the oneness under the impulse of spirit is realized. And, you know, when we have our identify as being group discussions every week so far, we are trying to identify that one which each of us in our limited emanated state is to serve. So the growing sense of oneness and brotherhood will be with us. The dark aspect has been brought about excuse me, by ages of glamour. The light is being emphasized and made clear by the world aspirants and disciples who, by their attitudes, their actions, notice all of these ways, their attitudes, their actions, their writings, and their utterances are bringing the light to dark places. So this is the responsibility we have to be light bearers, light carriers, the dispensers of the light. And the dark aspects, well, they're becoming ever more evident, aren't they? And sometimes appallingly so. You'd say, look at heaven, we outlived these things. And you would think we had, but apparently no. And we have to rise together again to take a stand, to drive off the clouds, the glamours, the veils, the mists, all of which prevent the truth, the light, from coming through. Okay, so let's see what we've been working on. He's making some generalizations. He's saying basically the United Nations and those who continue to be behind the growing spiritual values of the United Nations are helping humanity throw its weight on the side of the angel. And there are those who see the conflict, and they are at least promoting the battle. We're standing up to it. Okay. Rather than just submit to being overrun by these negative forces, there are those who see the issues and the necessary conflict between the dweller and the angel of the presence. Okay, and so we have the idea that a situation of possible triumph has been engineered. Can we overcome this negativity? And then we have to educate humanity in these distinctions: spirituality and materialism, sharing and greed, light and dark, fellowship and separation, the whole and the parts. And I think that will be enough. I'm not anxious to push it too far this morning, but the subject does continue, uh, showing us what the world situation really is. So let's take up more the next time we gather together. We've just read a couple pages, but that's okay for the moment. And I will bring this down, and then we'll have a chance to, on this September 11th day, have a chance to make comment on what we've been reading about the great division. You know, it's been said by the Christ, and it has to be understood. I come to bring not peace, but the sword. And that is the sword of discrimination, and between good and evil, and between the dweller and the angel. You know, because of the Christ, we're all going to see more accurately. Reading, let's see, and I think it's program 158 we've just finished. And today is not the 4th of September, it's the 11th. Okay. I'm not sure what just happened there. Something that I have to erase. And then we'll go on the 18th, September 18th, and it will be an evening program. And it'll be program number 159. And I think we are as far now as page 165, if I'm, yeah, well, 164, 165 is where we are. Anyway, it's a good view of what our responsibilities are and how we have to make good on them in order to help humanity see. All of this work we're doing here is the work of the observers of reality. And we see that observing reality is really a difficult task at this time. There are so many people that are just being swept by their emotions, and their will to believe is taking the place of their ability to assess what is true and what is real. We have to work hard to end that. Now, I think the age of Aquarius will be an age of truth. There's such a tremendous fifth ray coming through Aquarius, and the seventh ray will help also. And these are two rays that have a close relation to the truth. And of course, so does the second ray, which will be coming in another manner. And for disciples, it will be coming in via Jupiter, which is the esoteric ruler of Aquarius. So somehow the forces of truth will emerge. But right now, this recrudescence of glamour in a very intense form are coming in what some people have cynically called a post-truth era. Truth doesn't make any difference, and it's just getting your own way through lying and manipulation, telling the big lie. You know, as Goebbels understood, if you're going to tell a lie, tell it big. And we seem to be drifting into that state where people winning and retaining power is the main issue. And it's not just within the United States. There are other places where that kind of attitude is showing up. In Brazil, in Hungary, in the United Kingdom, and it's pretty strongly ensconced in China, you know, which is a blatant dictatorship with president for life, basically. And we have something equivalent, though more disguised, going on in Russia. I think anybody who tries to be the political opponent of the present leader is taking their life in their hands. So there's this assertion of power and the retention of power for selfish purposes. And our work behind the scenes has to demonstrate the fundamental flaws of that kind of approach. Okay, friends, so that's what we'll do. And now it's your turn to make a comment or have questions before we have our meditation on the glamour of lying. You know, why people are misrepresenting the truth. What is the motive behind that? And it's ever a light concealing motive. Maybe, you know, I'm remembering, well, you know, you can't say ever and you can't say never. I'm remembering Les Miserables, you know, the Victor Hugo great novel about social conditions in France, and there was a life-changing event that took place in the life of the fugitive from prison, Jean Valjean, where basically he was offered a kindness by a priest to spend the night when he was on the run. And, you know, a man who was projecting mightily upon him was following him and wanting to bring him back to prison. And Valjean, he stole the candlestick from the church. And then he was going to sell it and be able to continue his flight, but he was caught. You may know the story. And he was caught. And he was hauled back before the priest, and we say, this miscreant has stolen your candlestick. And the priest lied and said, oh, my son, why didn't you take the other one too? We had offered that to you. And then a nun who had never told a lie in her life, or at least had made it a policy never, ever to speak an untruth, had to swallow the truth at that moment for sake of a higher value. And so that was sacrificing a lesser principle for a higher principle, that of love and wisdom. And of course, what happened then is that was the turning point in Jean Valjean's life, and he was totally won over by the I don't know, great love and kindness of the priest who misrepresented the truth for a higher purpose. But that's not usually what happens. And you know, it was a very dramatic moment in the whole story. Okay, so your thoughts, and if someone will be so kind as to bring them forward, I appreciate that. If you have any. Okay. And I'm sure there are plenty of things that you might want to bring up.
No one has written in the chat box yet, and still waiting to see a hand raised.
Okay, well, all right. I mean, there's so much here, you know, obviously.
And now we have Vera.
Okay, yeah, okay. Maybe Vera usually speaks something, so.
Vera,
okay.
You're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, Mike. Hello, Michael.
Hi. Yes, Michael. Yeah.
I don't have any question. Just comment, because with all the coronavirus and politics, and I happen to be very opinionated person, and it was actually driving me crazy, and I was making myself sick. Plus having my own sort of responsibilities now. So I have to realize that as much as I would like to see some progress about the climate change and all sorts of things and political things, I can't. It just people have to see they are where they are. And as you said, we need to be able to discriminate and keep silence often, because I'm speaking for myself. I was making myself sick, and now I'm thinking, okay, nature, looking after my health. We are here for the long haul. So that's my.
Yes, I think it's an important thing. You know, basically, we all potentially are victims of imperil, as Master Moria says, and DK points it out, and we can chafe against the unpleasant reality with which we are presented and undermine our own usefulness by that particular type of irritation. Or we can be realistic and more detached and simply continue to work as we will, but not be entirely taken in by the apparently slow progress which is occurring in the foreground. DK says we often don't see the real result, the real progress in our work, and then we become, you know, victims of imperil. And Morius tells us that it actually is like a chemical precipitate against the walls of the nerve channels. So it gets very physical, you know, and it does undermine the health. And he warns disciples particularly about their attitude toward world developments and whether it will be approaching these difficult matters in the right way, or whether that nervous, emotional, unhealthful condition will be allowed to prevail. So, you know, I hope I'm sure we're all victim of it now and then. But I hope, go ahead.
So this is to me, so because I was equating the imperil like my own personal irritations, but you just put it onto the global context. So imperil can be also being unduly rattled by the global situation. So that's also imperil.
Yes, he does define it in a larger way, and he says, you know, the minor irritations that are fleeting in the life of a disciple. This is not what I mean. He actually defines it, and let's see if there's not too many of these imperil references, and maybe we can. Here it is. This is, I guess, you know, it's staring me in the face. In Discipleship 2, the danger of imperil, as the Master Moria calls it. Okay, this is somewhat erroneously interpreted as irritation by the neophyte, but it is not, in fact, irritation in the ordinary connotation of the word. The surface ripples of ordinary irritation and evanescent angers, to which all disciples are prone, are relatively of small importance. They pass, and in the sum total of the soul's attitudes to the personality, they evoke no response or registration whatsoever. What is referred to is the reaction of the disciple to world evil. This produces uncertainty as to the future, annoyance as to what is being done throughout the planet by non-disciples, criticism of national and international planning, and a general atmosphere of unhappiness, plus a sense of superior knowledge, all of this expressed in a negative and unconstructive manner. I'm going to put that in red because he specifies, you know, clearly what it means. To this, many disciples are today prone. They need to realize that world affairs are not and cannot be molded or determined by any hierarchical knowledge, in the possession of the disciple. World affairs and conditions have necessarily to be based upon the demand and the point in evolution of the mass of humanity, working through their representatives, chosen or imposed in every country. This demand can be and is affected, modified, spiritualized by the attitude of the teaching of disciples everywhere who are vocal and of humanitarian instinct. If, however, the will and knowledge of disciples in all nations were to condition world affairs and control entirely the political, economic, and social life of the people, it would produce a far more serious cleavage than now exists, for instance, between the rich and the poor and between the classes and the castes. It would produce a pronounced line of demarcation between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of men. And this would run counter to hierarchical intention, which is rapidly healing the existing breach and thus offset the work of the Christ, which the Christ set out to do on earth. This point is often overlooked by well-intentioned disciples. It is humanity which determines its own destiny. Disciples point the way, indicate the vision, set a needed example, and emphasize the ancient landmarks, but that's as far as we are allowed to go. So I think this is constructive when it comes to these kinds of attitudes that literally make us sick as we contemplate these stupidities, what we perceive. And, DK, basically, there's some place where he says about the stupidity of the average aspirant. And of course, his attitude is not one of constant criticism, is it?
Yeah.
Stupidity, aspirant. Let's just see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, here it is. My goodness. It's in the rules of the road. Upon the road, the hidden stands revealed. Each sees and knows the villainy of each. I can find no other word, my brother, to translate the ancient word, which designates the unrevealed stupidity, the vileness and crass ignorance, and the self-interest, which are distinguishing characteristics of the average aspirant. So that's what hierarchy sees of us, and yet obviously they've demonstrated how they respond. They're not just, they cannot force their way upon us. They can only point the way. Yeah,
But
this is in the
was so,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
so useful, the previous one about the imperial, to see it in a big picture. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
And it will point to our particular problem, really, because I know, I mean, I can fulfill just about everything he talked about when I think of this. So imperil, we've been given the their attitude towards imperil, page 68 in Discipleship Volume 2.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we can ponder it. Thank you, Vera. Yeah. All right. Does anybody else like to? Karen has her hand up, huh?
And Karen, you are self-muted. There you go.
Okay. You were speaking of the lies, and we have, Trump's the liar in chief, and Bob Woodward just came out with his new book, which has tapes of Trump telling these lies. And I think of, go back to the Nixon tapes, right? And that whole time when Bob Woodward and Bernstein were doing their work. And I just think it's significant that this comes out at this time, and it'll be interesting to see what the impact of his book is. It seems to be different. I mean, because he has the tapes, it's different than some of the, many of the other books that are coming out right now.
The tapes are there, and Also, the titles of the books are so germane, Fear and Rage, right? The first book was Fear, right? And
Right.
this book is called Rage, and it really shines the light on what's going on, and becomes a kind of among thinking people, an unevadable indictment. However, as we well know, the sixth ray, which is abundantly present in the souls of many in the United States, can latch on to a hero, and without thinking the matter through, can say, well, it's my hero, right or wrong, my country, right or wrong, So the thinking process stops, and it's almost a visceral defense mechanism. I'm sure there will be many who react in that way, and then it will try to be covered. It's amazing how a press secretary, right after a tape is played, can say it didn't happen, So obviously there is the will to ignorance among many people, as long as the ideal can be preserved. The ideal is narrow, it does not serve, it is false, and yet the people have such a passion to preserve it that they will sacrifice the truth to it. So that would be the negative reaction, but I do think it has had quite a profound effect on many people who have the tendency at least to think, or do think. It's astonishing, and to see these guys come back again 40 years later, or how long is it, or 50 years later? When did was the whole Nixon thing in the early 70s?
Yeah.
Or something? Yeah, so 40 something years later, and to see them again serving the truth, I think they're playing their role.
Yes, I think so.
And maybe they can do it without, maybe they can do it without irritation. See, obviously they can do it with indignation. Indignation is maybe another matter when you see a clear abuse which can be remedied. Where the irritation comes in is if you try to make people who are not there yet see your point of view and hold to your particular point of view that can only come with later development. DK basically said it's going to be a long time before humanity can really respond to the occult point of view. So, translation is certainly needed, but they're not being occultists. They're just being truth tellers, and that is so important. So let's see about that. So many books are coming out to expose the lies. Okay, now we see whether they can have a real effect on the passionate people who love their ideals more than the truth, or who have that tendency anyway. It's an interesting period, isn't it, Karen? It's just,
oh my goodness, and then we have all these fires going on here too, and it's very scary because they're pretty close, and we have a lot of smoke. So it's it's like the razor's edge here. I wanted to mention also that many years ago, Scott Peck, who wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled,
right.
He also wrote a book called People of the Lie, which was it was one of the most profound books I've ever read, from a therapist who is a spiritual being, and talking about, his experience in therapy with people about evil, and in therapy, how there were those people who could not bring out some of their material, their unredeemed aspects, their dwellers, whatever, into the light. That was really the problem. They just could not bring in the light, and it was a choice, for at least at some level, for those people who actually would refuse to do it.
Yeah, and it, it's often a question of courage. I was reading about the prerequisites for a lot of financial prerequisites. There were 5 of them to prepare for the reappearance of the Christ, and courage was the very, very first one. So I actually saw a video once of a compulsive liar. She was a woman. She obviously was much afflicted by a negative aspect of the third ray, and literally it was a compulsion not to speak the truth. One word after another, one sentence after another was a fabrication. It was like a kind of possession almost, or an obsession to lie. And it was just astonishing, because sometimes, you know, people will tell the lie to protect themselves and so forth, occasionally, you know. But this was an ongoing, unrelenting lying to every proposal, every question. It was a deviation from the truth with every response. Of course, it became obvious in the context of such a documentary, but it was a scary thing. You know, there was just no heart energy in it at all, just a mental manipulation of the next untrue thing to be said. And I suppose there are people that, you know, go in that direction. And yet we're told the truth is going to make us free. And obviously the lie is imprisoning. So we have much to do in, let's just say, in glamour-ridden America at the moment to see whether truth can prevail.
Yep.
And it's not alone. It's all over the world as well. In some places, telling the truth will mean your death. And, you know, that's just established. You go against the strong man, you die, you know. And there are people in the United States who would like to bring that particular response forward, the same as in these other dictatorships. So it's just we're at the moment of choice, that's for sure.
Well, thank you. I'm also really glad that you found your kitties.
Well, yeah, that can be a terrible thing, you know.
Yes.
They you know, because especially if they wander out there without a name tag,
Well,
and
right.
and you know, out into the woods and extending their range and all that kind of thing, and something has to be done. And I promised that I would go to the what do you call it, the place where cats are served, cats and dogs, and see if there's not some kind of Tuya got some of these things, but they were more for the dogs. And we need something that will create a perimeter beyond which they won't go.
Oh,
so
I
we'll
see.
see.
Well,
You know,
good luck with that.
yeah, right, exactly. Good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Anything else, friends? Anything else?
Michael,
Yes, dear.
do you hear well?
Oh, yes. You're good. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
I was thinking going back to the moment. This is 19 years from the World Centers, and
World Trade Center, yeah.
there was again reports of in Europe about the corona, and in European Union the constant meeting, and how this thing, when we look globally, how this thing is now quietly, silently changing us. Mm-hmm. It is a huge change in the global consciousness, which is a wonderful thing in that sense. It is also now calling the disciples to find new ways, and also very serious ways we have to think, because we must be able now to take care of our part. Nobody knows what kind of things has to be decided which will be the solution for this. There is not at the moment any overall solution. It is something about that the psyche of humanity has to be changed. And one part of this, what is forcing us to cooperation is about that this psyche is changing. Also, there was coming the report how the how do you call these animals who has backbone? Are they called
vertebrates?
Vertebrates.
Animals with backbone. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have been the rate has been going so quickly down, so they are diminishing. What does it mean? It's a big question. Worldwide Foundation was reporting that a few days ago, and in Southern America, 97% the deaths of the vertebrates animals are decreasing and are diminishing.
Or
I was thinking then
increasing. You're saying the deaths are increasing.
No, not
right?
not increasing, decreasing, going down.
Oh, okay.
The amount of them. So all around the world, but in Southern America, 97% going down. And it's a huge numbers. And when we think going back to the return of the solar angels, and there was also a huge change on Earth. And so what kinds of things are now happening? What are those which are human-based? What is this bigger movement?
Yes.
The fires, when we look again, the fires, we see that our globe is in so big turmoil and so huge change. So we disciples, we have to find out something what we must do. And I'm still thinking about that, what I have been now lately pointing out what DK said about the healing energy, which should be flowing through the disciples, is gained by love and joy. So these are the two qualities which are bringing the hierarchical healing. And that is about that leading to magnetic living. And I think this magnetic living for us is a big thing, to how to find that real state within us, that we find that quality of soul within us, that it is a true thing. Because when we can talk all kinds of theories, but if we cannot manifest that through us and bring forth that in true manners, then that is not happening. And I think that is a good goal for us, every one of us, to contemplate that am I vibrating this joy within me? Is our group vibrating the joy
and the love
out, and then the actions of love?
Because
somehow
yeah. Well, I think you are pointing towards initiatory consequences on our planet. And there have been, I think, some of the paleontologists, who are studying the different forms of life at different periods, have noted periods of great extinction that occur when many species are decreasing or dying out. And it has been brought forward, the question of whether we are passing through or preparing to pass through another such period of extinction.
Right.
Some of it is human abuse, but others of it has to do with the logos looking for new forms through which to express. You know, when you see some of these really, really ancient forms that have somehow been preserved, you wonder how much longer they will be preserved. Humanity does everything to maintain the diversity, but there are definitely forms of animal life that go way, way back, even to reptilian dinosaur days, and to the period of huge mammals, you know. And of course, look at the human attitude to take the DNA of a mammoth and try to revive the mammoth form, which has rightly passed out of incarnation. So, you know, we need the occult knowledge about that. And we need to know what is our responsibility and what is the initiatory passing through periods of extinction for the changes of forms engineered by the planetary logos. And we don't know those things.
But through that we see this, that that what kind of period we are living, that there is a huge change going through humanity at the moment. And what is our place in that, how we are helping to find the real answers, what has to be found by humanity.
Yes, and there was a statement that the war and some of these epidemics are being used to eliminate human forms that are no longer fit. And I thought, whoa, that's pretty cruel thing, but apparently necessary for the future of humanity. So the whole idea of, if you look worldwide epidemic, one of the purposes of it is to be rid of forms that must not persist. And who knows on what basis that judgment is made. We do know there are people who survive it and others who don't, you know.
Yeah, I think that form, what we are talking about, is the form in very microscopic level, and then also the form of emotional body. That these are breaking those kinds of fixed forms which are stopping the soul to descend. So we have to look in every single way.
Not just physical forms. Yes.
Right. How the soul is now being expressed. Is it being expressed? Is that being stopped? And because the disciples are in so crucial point in that destruction of the lower forms, that if we are not able to hold that, let's say this vibration of love and joy, they might sound very how would I call that? That
you know, just Pollyanna.
Yes, that we are not. Yes, and we are not recognizing those. We are living our lives and we just work and we meditate, but we have to also now very carefully start to look at what is that quality, what is coming through our groups. Is that, have we moved forward in that a real achievement of being able to create this magnetic point, because it's a qualitative point. Those are the things which are affecting then the lower lives. And I think there is something very big thing of us that we have to find now, the livingness into everything, that we actually create the field of that is going to affect to those who are directing in the lawmaking, in the directing the humanity. Now I mean the actual human beings in governments and in the places where they are giving information to people. So that that kind of background work is so important for us, that we are able to hold now something higher, really in real sense. Not just we talk about it, we just need to find that real thing, transformation in us, that we do that.
Yes, I agree. This is the reference to which it seems like a very harsh kind of reference. It's in the rays and the initiations. One of the purposes lying behind the present Holocaust, World War II, has been the necessity for the destruction of inadequate forms. This destruction could have been brought about by an act of God, such as a great natural catastrophe or a universal epidemic, and such had been the original intention. Humanity was, however, swept by forces that carried in themselves the seeds of destruction, and there was that in humanity which responded to those forces. Therefore, the law of destruction was permitted to work through humanity itself, and men are now destroying forms through which many masses of men are functioning. This is both a good and a bad thing. Viewed from the evolutionary angle, it is nevertheless a fact which cannot be gainsaid, and the problem, therefore, confronting the custodians of the will, working through the custodians of the plan, is to bring good out of the evil which man has wrought, and thus gear events to larger issues. So, you know, this particular paragraph also shows an angle that has to be considered by the wielders of will on a very high level, and it seems very harsh and very cruel, since we make every attempt to preserve the form, not only of animals whose time may have come, but of human beings who should not be, you know, certain types of human forms maybe should not be perpetuated. So along with what you say, which I think is very accurate about the love and joy energy and the decisions which people in power will make according to the spread of that energy, the counterbalance is this Ray 1 attitude, which seems to be operating even right now. You know what I mean? If you know, page 76 of the rays and the initiations. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So because
Okay.
what I am now trying to point out is that I think the solution is now in that attitude level, that we cannot find this kind of concrete immediate solutions, because this change is so huge.
Yeah.
I think we have to now go into the other step of that, and I think there is something always in life. If we study what Christ was teaching to his disciples, he was pointing out to go within and realize that the kingdom of God is within. And from that comes some kind of, in that realization comes some kind of strength and power, which cannot be bent under the, let's say, depression. There is, I saw then one document what was telling about the depression at the moment in Western worlds, which is huge. There are all kinds of depressions, named depression of pregnancy, of getting old, not having work, the global threats and all kinds of things. There are this kind of cloud. When we talk about these glamours, this kind of cloud, it is in for us. So what we do, we disciples, there are those methods what we do in the meditation, but I think it is very, very important for us to study our own so-called normal states, where we are we concerned, are we worried, are we creating more of this uncertainty than to simply stand in that, what DK was saying, that Christ didn't bother about this analytical brain stuff. He just went to work with love. And the disciple is ought to stand, not look down, up, sideways, but stand in that, in this energy of joy and love, so that the healing energy from hierarchy can enter in.
Yes, I think one cannot go wrong with that attitude. Oh, thank you, Tuija. Okay, now we may have just a little more here. Is that so, Michael? And then we have to, Tuija, do you want to do the meditation or do you want me to do it?
Okay, I think it's easier for you now because my computer is somewhere.
Okay.
I have only this mobile. I have only the mobile.
Okay. I'll do that.
And so we have one last question from Anne Veronica. Couldn't the Esoteric United Nations give some days of meditation for the lower kingdoms, such as the animal and plant kingdom?
Sure, the answer is yes, and there's a whole ecosystem.
It's coming. I just want to, I didn't get the microphone open. Yes, it is coming. Thank you for this question. It has been long time in my mind. And yes, it is coming very soon.
Okay. All right. Well, there's your answer, Anne Veronica, because we have to have this cooperation between the kingdoms, and for which man is the macrocosm. Okay, we'll find a way for that to play into the picture. Okay.
And actually tomorrow in Soul of Nations, sorry, Michael, tomorrow in Soul of Nations, we will work a little bit that way.
Okay. Then you'll be leading the meditation, I think, Tuija. Okay. It'll be a broadcast.
Yes.
It'll be a broadcast, and it will be a morning broadcast, I believe. Yeah. Okay, everybody, then let's get on to our work with the meditation we're going to do, and our glamour, lying, even pathological lying. There's so much of it now. It's just thick. And it is I read yesterday somewhere that if that lie, or those lies which Woodward exposed, had not been told, 180,000 of the 190,000 dead in the United States could have been saved. The lie, or the lies, according to this estimation, and the refusal to take action based on truth, has killed 180,000 people. Now, you can believe or not believe, and it can be investigated, but that is an extraordinary indictment, showing the even homicidal effects of that kind of misrepresentation of the truth. And how much is it going on in the other countries where concealment is occurring? Probably nowhere near as much, but to a certain extent, yes, also. Okay. So we're going to deal on this September 11th day, which was basically one lunar nodal cycle ago. The lunar nodes that have so much to do with fate, they do make the complete circle in about 19 years. So there we are. And we'll get into this now. So our glamour is lying, the reason for it, and even pathological lying, which when some people take it too far, it just goes that way, and there's no way then to correct the tendency. So we'll have some silence first. And, you know, we gather in this silence. It brings us together in a unity and to the borderland of synthesis. So in this silence, we are gathering together as an effective instrument to be used in the dissipation of glamour. And at this time, and all heavily glamorous times, it is a dangerous preoccupation. So we use the protective formula, which DK has suggested, using the long-armed cross of brow, heart, left eye, right eye. And we trace the cross, allowing the light to emerge between these points. As the soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. Take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. And as we trace our individual cross, the group cross appears, representing all of us and protecting all. Then we focus the dual light of matter and mind on the mental plane. We use the imagination to do this, and we blend those two lights on the mental plane, the vital matter and the reasoning mind. And we seek to recognize soul light also. And bring that soul light also to the mental plane, where it joins the other two lights, and the three merge as one. We get the feeling of that merging of the triple light into one light. Vital, soul-inspired thought. And then we say, the light is one, and in that light, shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. So each of us is armed with this triple light, from which our searchlight will go forth onto the astral plane as we say the words of the formula. The great searchlight and light of dissipation being activated and turned toward the astral plane. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So we are behind and within the beam, and that beam is focused on the astral plane, and that beam will find the area of glamour that we wish to focus on and will offer its dissipatory strength to the process. But we will strengthen the beam with our will, the spiritual will, so that it can withstand the encounter with glamour, and we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. So we're going to throw that beam upon the glamour to be dissipated, and this glamour, the glamour of lying, of misrepresenting the truth, even as one knows it, definite manipulation of truth in the form of the lie. And so with that in mind, and with our beams seeking out the tendency to lie, the impulse to lie, seeking that out and working to weaken it and dissipate it, we will say these words of power. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of lying. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour of lying from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour. Now we will take our 5 minutes of silence and of intensity of purpose, and we'll see the work proceeding. So let us do that, and we will use the formula, the word of power here, and proceed as we think may be best. So 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose as we work at the dissipation of this glamour of misrepresenting the truth, of lying. And so we think that we have done a little bit to help weaken the hold which this tendency has upon the mind of man, particularly upon the throat center, the brain. Generally, the heart doesn't lie, but the solar plexus, in combination with the throat center and the brain, that's where the manipulation occurs. And so the Sun of Truth will prevail. We will add what we can to that victory, which eventually will occur. We withdraw our beam from the astral plane back to the mental plane, and we shut that beam down and return the lights to their places, proper places. And it never hurts, I think, to assert the positive result of having worked in this way, which will mean that the radiant sun of truth shines brighter through the remaining mists and fogs and clouds which have been weakened. And that sun of truth characterizes the interplay between people, and a certain fearlessness develops, which shows that we have overcome the fear of truth. Let us sound the Om together from the mind, through the astral body, through the etheric body and physical brain, showing that some positive effect has occurred. So every day and every week together, we do our best to contribute to the necessary clarification and revelation. Tonight, it's a Zoom webinar at 5 p.m. and we'll be getting into, the cosmic fire, the latent heat and the active heat, the fire of dense matter and the radiatory fire of the etheric levels, the kind of foundation, the material support for all that is occurring subjectively. Thank you for being with us, meditating with us, and the communications group will continue to do its best to bring to you the opportunity to approach the ageless wisdom in various ways. And, you know, it's not just obviously the ones that we are doing here from the Temple of Silence, but other members of the Moria Federation are offering their webinars and broadcasts. And so we have a pretty strong, pretty rich offering to help us continue to strengthen our spirituality. So lots of love, many blessings, and we'll be back with you later today, but on the Zoom channel. Meanwhile, this will be converted, and will be appearing on Makara. All the best to you, and bye for now.